Okay. So hello everyone. He's João Vitor. Welcome to LangBytes, your podcast about computational linguistics. In today's episode, we have the honor of talking to Evan DeFrancesco. He's a linguist and a language technologist employed in the language technology space for the past 5 years. He's passionate, he's passionate about multilingual NLP, and he's constantly promoting the value and necessity of linguists in NLP context. Very important. He has worked at Appen as a linguist project manager, where he developed where he helped, companies implement NLP systems, including machine translation, semantic search, NER, and sentiment analysis. And for Grammarly, where he provided consulting services for grammatical error correction. Evan currently works for Language Tool, where he develops their English product and help standardize best practices for linguistic data management. And his favorite part of speech is the preposition. So a lot of things he has done. So we're going to learn a lot from them. So Evan, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you like our conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be able to speak with you.
Thank you. So as usual, or we are going to make as customary here in the podcast, we are going to start with a random question, which is something a little bit more personal about the guest. And your random question is, what is your favorite fiction book?
My favorite fiction book is probably Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. I
Oh,
really love a good mystery novel. And with this one, there are so many characters. It's set in a really interesting time period, in a really interesting setting on a train. I read it for the first time when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old, and
mhm.
I've revisited it a few times, and each time um, it's still it's still a delight, even though I know what's going to happen. It's still a delight.
Yeah, that's good. Very nice book. Um, so now we are going to move on to the serious questions. And I'm going to ask, you can answer, and then we're going to make like a chat, but I have the questions just to guide the conversation. So the first question is, can you tell us about your background in linguistics and how it led you to a career in language technology?
Sure, happy to. So I think like many people, I got into linguistics in university. It was never, it never really been exposed to the field of scientific linguistics up until university. And while I was doing my undergraduate degree, I had the opportunity to take a few linguistics courses, and I thought, well, this is really cool. I like language. I kind of like what's going on here with science. This is kind of cool. But my university didn't offer a linguistics degree. Um, so I thought, okay, I didn't discover linguistics, but I discovered this, I discovered that I liked doing linguistics, and I was trying to think of other ways I could learn more about this and get more into it. So I decided to apply for a master's degree in linguistics, and I was accepted, and I was able to go there, and I loved it. It was a year-long master's program.
Mhm.
I soaked up almost everything and anything that I could about linguistics. Um, in particular about pragmatics. I was really attracted to pragmatics at that time. Um, and so the time came, I had graduated from the program, and I realized that I needed a job because you need money to work, right? And
Yeah,
I was trying to find things that I could do with my linguistics degree. And it's not always an easy question to answer. What are you going to do with your degree? Especially when you have a degree like linguistics that is, um, it doesn't tell you immediately
yeah,
what the job
that's true.
opportunity is, right? I mean, if you study business, you go to work in management of some kind. If you study accounting, you go become an accountant. If you study education, you probably become a teacher. With linguistics, there's no job really. I mean, there are jobs that are called linguist, but there are really no jobs that are just
Straightforward.
linguist. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So after I had graduated, I spent quite a few months um, trying to find a position. And what was really helpful to me are things like this, where you're hearing experiences from people who were educated in linguistics and who found a career in it. And I forget precisely where I read this, but it was a blog of people who have linguistics degrees and who do really interesting things with those degrees. And this one person, um, her name was Sasha Wilmot. She worked at a company called Appen, and she said that she worked as on their linguistic projects at Appen. And I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. And then I happened to go on Appen's website, and I saw that they were hiring for people to work on some of their projects. What Appen did at the time and still does is they provide the training data that allows a lot of big tech companies' machine learning models to work. Those models need to be trained on something. They're trained on linguistic data. Appen in a lot of cases, Appen in a lot of cases provides that data. So I was hired as a project manager in their data collection division, where I was responsible for getting people to come into the office and just say lots of different sentences in lots of different ways, so that you could capture that speech data, so that you could train things
Mm-hmm.
like Siri on it. So you could train things like Amazon Alexa, Cortana, uh, in-car navigation, so that when you say, take me to the nearest gas station, the computer, the model can recognize that sentence and direct you to the right place. For me, that wasn't the most interesting thing in the world to do, just getting people to come in and read these sentences, although I learned a lot about quite a bit about audio engineering, more than I thought I ever would. Um, and then another position opened up within Appen in what was called their custom linguistic solution division, where I would be partnering with companies, again, to provide them with training data for their AI models, or their machine learning models, but I would be partnering with companies in managing the linguists who would be annotating that training data. And so we were working on a lot of different projects from as you said at the beginning of the call, from machine translation to sentiment analysis, semantic search, named entity recognition. And so I was being exposed to a lot of different technologies, um, as well as a lot of different languages, because we were working in um, you know, upwards of 30 languages. Appen, I think, works in something like 180. But the projects that I was working on were smaller. I think I was working with about
Mm-hmm.
30 to 40. Um, yeah, so I was just being exposed to this world of computational linguistics, what applied computational linguistics, what someone, and I just thought this was the most wonderful thing. Seeing these technologies firsthand and being able to work with them, it was something that was really, really rewarding, especially for someone like me who previously just came from a linguistics background, not a computational linguistics background. Um, so seeing the opportunity that someone with a background like mine had to be able to make in these areas in this technology was something that was really, really cool,
Mm-hmm.
really interesting.
Yeah. And although they're the jobs that you've done, they are more related to, as you said, applied computational linguistics. There are times that we can apply linguistic concepts and theories into the job we are doing. So um, we can take advantage of you could have taken advantage of the background you had on linguistics to do the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Not everything that we do is informed by
Mm-hmm.
theory, but quite a bit of it is. Although I will say I've never, in the 5 years that I've been working, I've never had to worry about, is generative grammar really a good theory or not? That never once has
Uh-huh.
come up. I know it's a huge matter of academic debate, but at least in my work, it has never come up once.
Yeah.
Um, in at least what I've been doing in language technology, maybe that is a big debate in applied computational linguistics in the language technology field. In my experience, it hasn't been, but certainly a lot of what we do is informed um, by linguistic theory.
Great. So thank you. The next question is, how do you see the role of linguists in the language technology space, and what values do they bring to NLP projects and contexts?
Sure. So I think the first thing is that linguists are trained to do several things as part of their education. They're trained to analyze and examine data empirically. They're trained to pay attention to detail. They're trained to find order in chaos. They're trained to draw conclusions, and then they're also trained to communicate those results. And so, I mean, you could reasonably say, okay, well, lots of students, lots of people who have an education of any kind are trained to do those things. And to a large extent, that's true. But linguists in particular are trained to work and deal with language, work and deal with language data. And language is really messy. I mean, that's the first thing that a student learns in their introduction to linguistics class is that language is really messy. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? Um, because people think, okay, well, I speak a language, I speak a language natively. I know things about my language. And to some extent, that's true, right? If you're a native speaker of your language, you have a lot of implicit knowledge about that language. You know when things don't sound right, but you don't
Mhm.
necessarily know how your language works. Um, and you probably don't know so you don't know how your language works. You don't know necessarily um, the rules that go behind its structure. You don't necessarily know um, about the semantic and syntactic processing that go into language, um, about its phonological properties, things like that. Um, and linguists do know that. And so when you're working with a product that is a language product, it's important to have the people who are specifically trained to understand language, to be able to analyze it, working on that product. Um, and I think that's true on both what you might call classical applications of linguistics, things like statistical machine translation, things like grammar and spell checking. It's important to have people who know about the structures of language um, working on those products. But I think it's also going to be true for the technologies that we're going to see in the coming weeks, months, and years with the rise of these massively huge large language models. Um, I don't know. I know it's really in vogue right now for people to come on to podcasts and talks like this and say things about how chat GPT and large language models like it are going to be um, the next big thing. They're going to take over our jobs. We all need to be afraid of them, yada yada yada. I don't know that that's true. I I don't know that that's true, but I do know that it's important that you have linguists working on those products. Um, yeah, it's important that you have linguists working on those products because when you get into things like that, you get into questions of natural language understanding. Um, and I think that it's important to have the people who have spent a lot of time thinking about semantics, thinking about pragmatic implications of language, working on those products so that you can build a good product that can deliver real results to your users.
Mhm.
I also think that it's important that you have linguists working on these projects because I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but as linguists, we're usually used to working with people from speakers, users of different language communities. So we're exposed to multilingual environments and we're exposed to different sociocultural environments. Um, and I think it's really important that you have linguists on the teams that are developing these projects who can make a push for multi-language NLP and especially NLP for low resource languages. Um, because a lot of companies, they're concerned with what is commercially viable for them. They're concerned with what is profitable for them. And that's fine. A company needs to make money, right?
Mhm.
But a linguist who has worked with a certain language community can make a good case for offering language technologies that are made for that community. And for that reason, I think linguists can offer a lot more than just knowledge about a language's structure. I think they can make a case for introducing these technologies to more communities than many of the engineers and business people perhaps are thinking about. Um, and just another thing, coming back to the idea of large language models replacing jobs, right? Um, yeah, you can have a dictate. So let's think about court reporting. If you're in court and the person there is typing the transcript of what's said in the courtroom, is that a job function that could be replaced by something like ChatGPT or another large language model? Sure. But, you know, when the court reporter, they have to swear an oath that what they are writing, what they are typing down is an accurate representation of what was said in the courtroom. You can't get a large language model to swear an oath.
Yeah.
What it has recorded, what it has reported is a true and accurate representation of what was said in the courtroom. Um, and I know this doesn't answer your question of what linguists can bring to NLP technologies, but I just think it's an important. Well, I'm kind of talking around in circles, but maybe that is something that a linguist could do, because a linguist, especially one who has studied maybe pragmatics, understands the forces that go behind what is an oath, what it means to swear an oath. Yeah, so maybe linguists do have a role there to play in ethics when it comes to these kinds of technologies.
Yeah. Hmm. Good. And just following up with your answer, how do you think we linguists can make companies see our value? How, how we can add value to their products?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's a difficult one to answer because it's not always immediately obvious making a business case for hiring linguists. Um, what I think it comes down to, I mean, I think there has to be either someone in the organization already who is a linguist or someone in the organization or who already knows something about linguists. Um, but I think it comes down to being able to demonstrate. I think it comes down to being able to demonstrate knowledge about the product that, let's say, an engineer or how the product functions, that maybe an engineer or knowledge about how the data works, um, that an engineer might not know. How
Mhm.
does a linguist do that? What are the exact steps that linguist needs to take to do that? I'm not entirely sure. I've been really fortunate that I've not had to answer that question in my career. I've always worked in the three companies that I've worked for. They've always recognized the importance of having linguists, a trained linguists working
Mhm.
on their products, working on their data, working on their solutions. Um, but how someone would do that starting from the ground up, I'm not entirely sure, but I imagine it would be quite difficult.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Um, our next question is more related to you can talk about your current job or the past experience that you had. How much programming is involved in your work, and how much programming do you consider competitive for computational linguist positions?
Sure. Um, so in my work, I don't write production level code, and that's probably a good thing. Because I am not a good programmer. I'm a very slow programmer, and my code tends to be bloated. If any future employer happens to be watching this podcast, I promise you by the time that I'm applying for your role, I will be a better programmer. No, but in my day-to-day work, I don't do any production level coding. Um, but what I do is I use the command line almost daily to help organize my work, searching for patterns in data. I also write little scripts to help automate some of the processes that I already do. Um, as a computational linguist at Language Tool, I do write large amounts of patterns using XML code and regular expressions that and then these patterns are applied over to text of language to try to be able to identify errors in users writing.
Mhm.
I also do some minimal amount of Python programming as well, again with pattern recognition. But again, I'm not writing production level code. Um, and I think that reflects kind of the diversity of what the job title computational linguist entails. Um, because I know some other people who work for other companies who have the job title computational linguist who do write a lot of production level code. Um, and so how much programming does a linguist or a computational linguist need to know to be able to be competitive in the field? Well, that's kind of an open question, right? Different companies are going to have different requirements for their computational linguist positions. So I guess my recommendation would be to just know as much as you can. If you're interested, you know, learn as much as you can and really go down the rabbit hole. But I think it's important, no matter if you're a computational linguist like me who does very minimal amount of coding or a computational linguist who does a lot, is I think you need to have a really good foundation. Um, I think you need to have a really good foundation because you never know what tomorrow might bring. I might go into my meeting tomorrow with my manager and she might say, okay, you need to start writing a lot more production level code. And I would need to be able to respond to that quickly. Um, so I think it's important that no matter what level of your, no matter if you're, no matter if your job description has very minimal coding responsibilities or maximal coding responsibilities, whichever position that you're going for, if you want to become a computational linguist, I think it's important that you know at least your way around the command line and at least basic to intermediate level of a major programming language, Python, Java, whatever. Maybe C++ and C# are overkill. I don't know. But at least to be able to feel comfortable doing things with code. No one expects you, at least I don't think, in a computational linguist position, to be the equivalent of a computer scientist, to be the equivalent of a data engineer or software engineer. I don't think anyone expects that. But you should be able to know how to do things with code. You don't necessarily need to go or to know the theory behind programming languages, behind data structures, behind software structures or whatever. But being able to do something with code is an important skill. So little projects that you can do just to keep your skills up to date, all very important things. But just being able to do something, do anything
Mhm.
with code, I think is important. Because once you can do one thing, then you can probably do another thing, and then another
Yeah.
thing, and another thing, and another thing. And it
Hmm.
builds over time. Your skills get better.
Yeah,
And then
that's true.
finally one day, you might be able to say you write code. I do not yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah. And also, I would add a caution, like, even if you are a computational linguist who has to do a lot of coding,
Hmm.
don't lose track of your linguistics background because
Absolutely.
sometimes you can get caught up on doing a lot of coding and then you
Hmm.
become like a data engineer, data scientist, or computational scientist, and you don't use your linguistic background on computational. So I would say that if you do a lot of coding, pay attention to that because that's your background. I mean, if you still like linguistics, doing linguistics, pay attention
Yeah.
to that. Yeah, so thank you again. Now we are going to move on to a question that I'm very interested about. You have mentioned that your favorite part of speech is prepositions, and I want to hear more about that because one of my undergraduate research was on prepositions.
Yeah,
Uh,
you sent me the paper and I read it and I read it with a lot of interest.
oh,
Um,
really? We can
yeah,
discuss it later. Uh,
okay.
can you share why you find prepositions so fascinating, so interesting, and how they play a role in NLP?
Sure. Um, I find prepositions, so as a general rule, I find closed classes of words um, really fascinating
And they
because,
are not so close, right?
well, they kind of are. I mean, no one's going around to English or Portuguese and adding new prepositions to the language, right?
That's true.
Right. So I think that's about so no one's adding prepositions to English. You have to kind of, or any language, you kind of have to make do with the set of words that you already have. And with that small set, you can do a whole lot of things. Prepositions are incredibly polysemous. They have multiple meanings. You can be in Rome, you can be in a hurry, you can be dressed in black, you can pay in cash, you can find 1 in 4 computers don't work at your job. You can what other things can be in? You can sit in a chair. I don't know, you can't sit in a chair, you can sit on a chair, but you
Mhm.
can put that chair in a box. And so each one of those instances of the preposition in has a different meaning. And so that was originally what attracted me to prepositions is just how polysemous they are, um,
Mhm.
and how we're able to make sense of all that. And I guess from what role do prepositions play in NLP or NLP applications, um, that comes into the equation, I guess, both with maybe machine translation and computer vision or the intersection of computer vision
Oh,
and
yeah.
NLP. Um, because one of the ways that we use prepositions is, of course, to express spatial relationships. The cup is on the table, the car is in the garage, the tree is above the man, or the man is below the tree, not sure. So being able to express those spatial relations, um, something that we do, add this to a computer vision model, you get an image of something. It's able to see those relationships between the various entities in the image how do you then get the model to be able to describe that image in natural language? It has to know things about spatial relations. It has to be able to encode those spatial relationships, and then be able to express those via prepositions.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of machine translation, well, prepositions are highly idiomatic, right? What I might say, the painting is on the wall in English. Um, and a French person might say le tableau est accroché au mur. They might use the preposition au, in which in English we would probably translate something as at. If you take it out of context, you're translating that as
Mm-hmm.
at. Instead of a translation for the preposition in, or on, which is something like sur. So being able to navigate, I guess, the cross-lingual transfers of prepositions or preposition use in one language to another, because again, they're highly idiomatic, highly idiomatic, can play a role in the machine translation area. So there are many, many more areas I think too, but those are just two where prepositions are one really fascinating for NLP applications.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that this type of part of speech, they they are what keep us employed
Yeah,
because they're very
definitely,
difficult to handle. So I have to call a linguist to solve that.
definitely, definitely. Nouns and verbs, those are fun. Those are exciting too. But the semantics and syntax of function words like determiners, prepositions, particles, um, those are a lot more complicated. And I think you're right. Those are what keep us employed.
Because a computer scientist can't solve that without us.
I think so
Uh,
too.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is, can you speak to the importance of collaboration and teamwork in developing effective language technology products? And then you can focus on linguist to linguist or linguist to the engineering team. You can choose your focus.
Sure. So I think linguist to linguist, we learn things better in collaboration. I know I have that in my day to day. I work with another person on the English product, and I learn so much from her, both both about the subject matter and about the actual technologies that we're using to build our product. She and I have constant dialogue, constant communication, which makes for a really collegial atmosphere, and it just makes it a lot easier to work for a
Mhm.
place when you are having good collaboration with your immediate colleagues on the same level, on the same team. In terms of collaboration with other people in the organization, I think that's also very important. This kind of entire talk, we've been, um, talking about how only linguists can do certain tasks, and only, we've been building up linguists as these great people, and linguists are great people. We know a lot and we do a lot, but we're only one small piece of the puzzle. To have a good product, you need to have a good NLP product, you need to have um, people who are working on the models themselves. So the machine learning engineers, you need to have people working on the back end. Um, so those three teams, the language team, the machine learning team, and the backend team, they're the ones who are helping the product to run, helping the product, making sure that the product is working well. And if the machine learning model is not great, then no amount of input from the linguistics team is going to help. And if the backend isn't working, then it really doesn't matter if your machine learning model is great, because there's no way for the information, the product, whatever, to get in touch with the people on the front end. And then you also need to be able to liaise with the people who are working on the front end, who are working on maybe the user experience or the user design.
Mhm.
Um, because so I'm just really familiar now with grammatical error correction systems. But if you have a rule that provides a suggestion to a user in a certain context, it doesn't matter if it's the best grammatical error correction rule in the world. If the users don't have any use for it, or you can work on a product, you can work on a product that uses the latest, the most efficient, the most computationally efficient model and the best linguistic data. But if it's of no use to your users, then it is a useless product, a useless effort. So it's always important to have collaboration both with the people who are working on the front end of things and the people who are working on the back end, so that you can deliver a product that is best for your users. And then also with the non-technical teams too, like sales and customer service. It's important that you have constant feedback from them as well, because oftentimes they're the ones who are getting the either the complaints or the compliments from the users. And it's important that you understand how your little piece of the puzzle is perceived, at the end of the process, at the end of the process, at the end of the pipeline. Because it's really easy to become just so focused on the little things that you do. And having that context from the other teams can help you. Well, obviously, one, it understands how you fit into the larger picture, which then helps you to consider problems from a different perspective. I know that when I first started, particularly at Language Tool, I was really focused on making sure that everything that I did was grounded in language theory, linguistic theory, or maybe prescriptive language structure. Over time, I've come to realize that the users don't necessarily need something like that. And so I've become more
Aware?
I've become more aware. And more more open to pushing things that are not so rigid in their design or structure.
Good, good. Um, and more, just a follow-up question. More recently, what kind of team are you working more closely besides the linguistic team?
Sorry, what was the question?
What other teams are you working more recently, like in a more intense way,
Yeah.
besides the linguistics team?
So right now I'm working really closely with our product. We call them the product team, but the people who are building the UX, the user experience and the user design functionalities of our platform. Sometimes I have another colleague who works more closely with the machine learning team, but recently in the past month I've been working very in depth with the product team, with the UX UI people, because we're planning to launch a new feature. I can't say too much about it, but we're planning to launch a new feature soon. And we've been working to make sure that what we're working on in the linguistics department is something that can easily be translated to the user interface. Because like I said, it doesn't matter how good the linguistic product is. If the users can't use it, it's useless. So yeah, I've been working very closely with my colleagues there.
Right, nice to know that. Thank you. So our last question. So what advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in computational linguistics? And you can give a broad idea, or you can give a specific idea regarding like the career that you're in now, because I know computational linguistics is very broad, so you can narrow it down if you want.
I think broadly speaking, just as we mentioned earlier, learn how to do something with code. Um, take, if you're still a student, take all the courses that you can about linguistics, structure, semantics, phonetics, if you're interested in text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and the other technologies that use that. Take all the courses that you can there. If you're able to do an internship, do an internship. I didn't do an internship, and it's something that I regret. I think it would have been very useful, very helpful for me. One, in learning just how companies work in general, but then two, learning about how linguistics works in
Mhm.
industrial applications. So if you are able to do an internship, I think that's really valuable experience. Um, when it comes time to apply for a job, I think just apply for anything and everything that looks interesting to you. I think when I was first looking for a job, I had sent out over 200 applications over the period of 5 or 6 months. Um, maybe it wasn't 200. That seems too high. Maybe it was closer to 100. But I did a lot of applications um, over a period of 5 to 6 months, and obviously most of those were rejected. But all it takes is one company to say yes. All it takes is one company to say yes, and eventually one did. And I think it's a lot easier to find a job in a field when you already have a job in a field. I know that can sound really discouraging, but I really do think it's easier to find a job when you already have a job. And so maybe that means that you're not applying for, a computational linguist position. You're not applying for an analytical linguist position or an NLP engineer position or whatever. Maybe you're applying for data analyst. Maybe you're applying for, like I did the first time, for a project management position, a linguistic project management position. And then once you're in a company with that position, you can begin to think about how you can make moves either within that company or outside of that company um, to a position that is more aligned with what it is that you want to do. But I think any kind of experience that you can get, I think any kind of job experience that you can get is valuable. And I think any kind of experience that you can get working with language in some capacity is valuable as well. Um, so broad strokes, that would be my advice. Learn how to do something with code, learn everything that you can about linguistics, and apply for a job, any job that seems somehow related to what it
Mhm.
is that you want to do. Um, I know that can be really frustrating, but a lot of times getting a job is just being in the right place at the right time, and do everything that you can to make sure that you are in the right place at the right time, um, so you can achieve that.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I would add, networking is super important these days. So
What was
try
that?
to networking.
Networking, yeah.
Yes, try
Yeah,
to
that's something
network
that
as
I
much as possible.
definitely, that's something that I didn't do. And I'm pretty bad at networking. Uh, so I think I've done quite well without networking, but I think it is important. It definitely has advantages. So if you are able to expand your professional network in any way, um,
Mhm.
that can bring a lot of rewards to you down the line.
Yeah.
And
And
it's how you
try,
learn.
yeah, and try to find ways to stand out from the crowd. Maybe, I don't
Yes.
know, LinkedIn posts or, I don't know, posting projects, computational projects that you've done.
Yeah. Update your GitHub profile
Mhm.
um, with projects. Doesn't matter what they are, just get something out there. Just, I
Just do it.
I think when it comes to working, no experience is bad experience. Um, so just any experience that you can get, whether it's, on the job experience, whether it's via networking, whether it's via working on projects, that's all important. And it all contributes to it all contributes to your career progression in some way or another.
Yeah, that's true. So thank you, Evan. That was my last question. Do you have any final thoughts or comments that you would like to say to our viewers?
Um, I'm just very happy that you asked me to join you. I really appreciate being able to share a little bit about my career with you. And to the people who are listening, um, I wish you really all the best in whatever it is that you're doing. If you're still a student, good luck on your exams. If you're looking for a career, good luck on that too. I know how challenging it can be. Um, so just keep on doing good work.
Yeah, see, folks. So thank you very much, Evan. It was quite a conversation. I super like it. And I'm sure those watching learned a lot from you today. I would like to ask you if I can put some, for example, your LinkedIn profile on the
Sure.
video. Okay.
Sure.
So people, you can network with Evan if you want to. So you can go there and chat with him. He's super polite and super friendly. So he will answer you. And again, Evan, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. It was a great chat and nice to meet you again.
Pleasure to meet you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks. Bye. See you on the next video.